So welcome everyone to this fourth episode of The Lockdown, and it's a great pleasure today to chat to a very good friend of mine, CEO, consultant, founder, speaker, activist, a living brand, I would say, and an expert in much more than brands, and one of my favorite thinkers. So it's a pleasure to welcome Cindy Gallop. Cindy, how are you?
I'm great, delighted to be here.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the main theme that I'm exploring here is sort of a talent in lockdown or locking up human potential, at least temporarily. So I want to start by asking you how your lockdown experience has been going so far. What have you learned about yourself and the world in this strange period?
Sure. So I guess I may be a bit different from other people you talk to about this, Tomas. And by the way, I count my blessings every day. But for me, not a lot has changed because, first of all, the thing I'm very grateful for is that I am by nature a true solitary. I am enormously fond of my own company. My idea of total happiness has always been to be in my apartment on my own with nowhere to go and nobody to see. And now I get to do that every day. So actually, lockdown, to be frank, suits me down to the ground. And again, this is something that I feel very fortunate for. As you know, because you've been here, I am in lockdown in a lovely apartment with light and views and outdoor space, which is a special blessing at this time. And so I don't feel stir crazy because of that. And then, my business, Make Love Not Porn, is a wholly digital venture. My tiny team and I are very used to working remotely because, until we raised some funding a couple of years ago and could afford a co-working space, previously we'd always worked remotely. And so it's very easy to go back to that. And, from Make Love Not Porn's perspective, the pandemic is our time. Because now everybody is at home globally, and we're a global platform. The world is more in need of love, intimacy, and human connection than ever before. People have plenty of time on their hands to become Make Love Not Porn stars, which is what we call our contributors. And our revenue sharing business model, which I concepted 11 years ago deliberately to democratize access to income, could not be more welcome at a time when so many people have been negatively financially impacted. And we are hearing already from Make Love Not Porn stars who have lost their jobs, are unemployed, as so many people are, and are telling us that our monthly payouts are tremendously helpful. One Make Love Not Porn star who is unemployed has decided to camp out during quarantine, so their costs are very, very low. But they said they've discovered they can live on what they make from Make Love Not Porn through the pandemic, which has, given them tremendous peace of mind. And so, I am recalibrating our investor pitch to make it clear that not only are we a pandemic-proof venture, we are a pandemic-accelerated venture. And so all of that adds up to, a very fortunate, my time in lockdown is very much like my time generally. So not a lot's changed in that respect.
And despite your natural predisposition to adapt to the situation, have you learned anything about yourself that you didn't know before? And what about humanity? I know you're a deep thinker on human affairs, but also not just metaphorically, but physically from where you're sitting. You can observe a change in the streets that surround you. And is there anything about humanity or the human reaction to this that you have learned or that maybe surprised you?
Again, from my own very subjective perspective, what I am finding is that, to be frank, everything I've been saying for years is truer now than ever before. And I'll respond to that, A, from a personal perspective, and B, from a general humanity perspective. From a personal perspective, I've been battling to build a startup in the most challenging sector of all, sex tech, for 11 years. And I've been interviewed along that path many times by journalists who've asked the question, so Cindy, what do you think are the most important qualities for an entrepreneur? And my answer has always been the same: three things: persistence, resilience, and the ability to manage your own mind. I've gotten very good at managing my own mind, and that is actually a tremendous asset in lockdown during a pandemic. Mm-hmm. Because, historically through hashtag startup stress, and again, I've spoken about this in interviews many times, but it's been tremendously stressful building Make Love Not Porn. And so, just one example of mind management. So every day I've said to myself, okay, Cindy, you are only allowed to stress about one thing today. Okay, so everything else we're going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, put it aside. You're going to stress out about one thing and you're going to work out how to solve that one thing, and then you can move on to the next. And actually, I'm finding that approach works really well in lockdown and in pandemic, because there is so much to worry about that you really need to focus in on, one thing at a time to worry about and what you can do to kind of deal with that. Not least because, again, as I've been saying for a long time, decisions made out of fear are very bad decisions. So that's my personal finding. And then at a broader human level, so the pandemic has ensured that the world will never be the same again. And that is actually a very good thing for those of us who were never the status quo to begin with. And so when I say that, I'm finding that what I've been saying for years is now true. So again, for years, reporters have interviewed me, most often in the context of my work championing gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. And this sequence of questions is repeated all the time. The reporter goes, so Cindy, are you seeing change happen, in the way you'd like it to? And I go, no. And they go, oh, why is that? And I go, because at the top of every industry is a closed loop of white guys talking to white guys about other white guys, and expand that. So then the reporter asks, so Cindy, what do you think will make change finally happen? And my response for years has been only one thing: total, complete, utter fucking disaster. And we have it. So it is only when things break down this utterly and completely that allows new models and new ways of doing things to emerge that never would have emerged otherwise. And that is a huge opportunity. And so, and I'm saying this in every, talk I give online and every, virtual fireside chat or whatever. I'm urging everybody to be aware of the fact that there are two dynamics happening at the moment. The first is all of the things that the pandemic is making happen. The old world order is irrevocably and irretrievably broken down. And so things are happening because of that. But then the second dynamic is absolutely make those observations and then leverage the shit out of them. Because there is what the pandemic is making happen, and then there is what every one of us can make happen ourselves off the top of that, to completely reinvent the world, to be the one we want to live in and work in going forwards. And I'm encouraging everybody to look at the fact that this adversity absolutely drives opportunity in that context.
Mm-hmm. So are you hopeful that the next phase or the new not normal will be better in some ways, more inclusive, more creative? What is the opportunity for us to achieve and leverage? In what main areas do you think progress is likely to happen?
Sure. So you've made the classic mistake there, Tomas. You've asked that question in the passive tense. Never do that. Okay. Because all of this changes when you and I and everyone else make it change. And I don't wait for things to change, I make them change. Change is entirely dependent upon what we do to actually make it happen. It's not going to just happen, as we all sit back and wait for it to. And that is why, as I say, I am urging everybody to take what is naturally happening because of pandemic and then make that work for you the way you want it to. And then, yes, absolutely, we are able to reinvent and redesign the world we want to live in.
Yeah. So I guess the thinking would be that for us to make change happen, we can be nudged or prompted by a situation that is unexpected and dramatic, where you're forced to go outside your comfort zone.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And the important thing there, Tomas, is to shed old world order thinking, okay, and to completely blue sky it. So one of the things that I've been encouraging people to do, because when I give my talks these days, I always begin them by saying I'm acutely aware that I'm talking to an audience where whoever they are, they're all struggling. I'll be talking to people who've lost their jobs, have lost all sources of income, are feeling very financially insecure, are very worried about the future. And the opportunity there is to, forget the familiar, forget the way you've always been used to working, and blue sky what you now want to happen. So for example, when it comes to something very much on many people's minds at the moment, which is financial challenges. And again, by the way, all I'm doing is I'm saying what I've been talking about for years, but I am finding that it is more relevant now than ever before. So for years, I've been, talking about an area I'm especially passionate about, which is redesigning business models. Because for years, I've observed that people have tended to think one of two things. Either this is our industry business model, this is the way our industry has always made money, this is the only way it can make money, or they think there are a set number of business models out there and we have to operate one of those. Neither is true. Your business model can be anything you want it to be, and a really good starting point is to simply ask yourself the question, how would I like to make money? Because it's a safe bet you would rather be making it not the way that you have been used to be making it. And so I'm encouraging people now to ask themselves that question, in an ideal world, how would I like to be earning income? How would I like to be making money? Because now all bets are off. And so when you start from the point of questioning what has historically been happening, identifying what you would like to do, that opens up new ways of thinking that open up new opportunities.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about your views on the redesign of businesses to increase gender equality, or at least reduce the obstacles that women face or have faced historically. Let me start with one question. I mean, do you think there has ever been a worse time in human history to be a middle-aged white male like myself? Is this so far the worst time in history, or did we ever have it worse than now?
No, this is absolutely the best time to be a middle-aged white man, because the opportunity is finally there to benefit from the innovation and disruption of thinking of all the rest of us who are not middle-aged white men to redesign the world in a way that will make it a far happier world for you to live in.
Very good. I like that. And as somebody who can not just almost, or I think you can see Madison Avenue from one of your windows, but arrive to the world of advertising when it was pretty much, I think, probably, I don't know if you would call it the end of the Mad Men era or still the Mad Men era or the final tale. How has that industry specifically changed, if at all, in the last, let's say, decade?
It hasn't.
It hasn't.
At all. No, and it is absolutely engineering its own demise as we speak, which is why, again, for years, I've been encouraging, women in advertising, people of color in advertising, LGBTQ in advertising, the disabled in advertising, and I literally articulate it like this, Tomas. I go, start your own industry. And what I mean when I say that is start your own business. But I articulate like that because when you start your own business as someone who is other, you are literally starting your own industry. You are starting the industry that we would all much rather be working in. That's the opportunity in advertising. And again, I'm encouraging everybody who is other in advertising to seize that opportunity now, because the old world order is crumbling, and the white men who've been running the old world order have no idea how to reinvent the future. And they need to step back and take guidance and leadership from the rest of us. And by the way, that is literally what white men in leadership now need to do. And I'm saying it this straightforwardly because nobody else is. literally the single best thing any white man in leadership could do now is literally step back and consciously say to themselves, I'm going to try something radical. I'm going to invite the women in my company. I'm going to invite the Black people in my company. I'm going to invite the Asian people. I'm going to invite the LGBTQ people in my company to tell me what they think we should be doing. A few years ago, for the Cannes advertising, International Festival advertising, which used to happen every summer in Cannes, Campaign magazine, the trade publication, booked a huge billboard on the Croisette at Cannes, which is where everyone walks up and down. And they asked a number of us in the industry what were the pieces of advice that we would give the industry when it came to diversity, that they would feature on this electronic billboard, so they rotated through them. And I knew that, this billboard will be seen by the white male leaders of the ad industry walking up and down the Croisette every day at Cannes. And so, I gave a whole bunch of suggestions to Campaign, including, the piece of advice, which quite honestly is the single most effective thing any white male leader can do to drive enormous change: hire into equal power with yourself a woman you feel threatened by.
And that happens pretty often, I would say, or
that happens never.
And this was when?
This was several years ago. This is 3 or 4 years ago at Cannes. No, I can tell you nobody acted on it.
Yeah.
But I felt it was important to say it. Yeah. And I say that to us knowing, you would not believe the number of women in advertising, just as there's an equally large number in every industry, who have not been promoted and have not been able to lead because the men above them felt threatened by them.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel, that the main change has been in narrative and rhetoric, that sort of, if anything, over the years in the world of business, sexism has gone subliminal or benevolent, which makes it more dangerous and harder to beat in a way? Because when you watch a Mad Men episode of the 60s or whatever, it's easy for even a chauvinist to be shocked today at what you see, right? But what you're saying is it hasn't changed at all. It's just a matter of surface and it's masked now. Would that be your assessment?
Yeah, but when Mad Men was running, I used to say, what's depressing about Mad Men is how much about the industry has changed and how much has not changed. And yes, absolutely, the commitment to diversity has been entirely superficial and verbal and non-authentic. It's why I've been saying for years again, don't talk diversity, don't do inspirational campaigns about diversity, don't do stunts about diversity, just fucking be diverse.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so talk to me a little bit about how you found your own identity, if I can use that word, and also leadership style, especially coming from an interview that has or still is so sexist, and becoming a strong leader there, emerging in a context that was and still is probably very adversarial and adverse. Did that shape the way you operate, you lead, you think, you manage people and yourself, or were you always you and, that sort of help you achieve what you achieved?
Well, I've always been me, but equally, Tomas, again, I've been asked for years by journalists, so Cindy, how much sexism did you encounter coming up through the ranks in advertising? And my response is, a fish does not know what water is.
Mm-hmm.
It was all around me, and I had no idea, because that's just the way things are, I will say that I have been extraordinarily lucky in my career in advertising, and I've been lucky for a couple of reasons. The first is that I've absolutely encountered sexual harassment, but I never encountered the kind of sexual harassment that has derailed so many women's careers. Okay, and that's sheer luck, by the way. And then the other thing I've been extraordinarily lucky in is that I've had the good fortune to work for a number of men in advertising who genuinely saw my potential when I didn't see it myself and wanted me to succeed and championed me. That was extraordinary luck, because so many women can't say the same thing. And at every agency I worked at, I was lucky to work for male bosses, at Ted Bates, where I started, J. Walter Thompson, and then in my especially formative years at Gold Greenleys Trott and at Bartle Bogle Hegarty, and especially at BBH, where I spent 16 years, where, Nigel Bogle, John Bartle, John Hegarty, the partners, saw my potential and believed in me and championed me and wanted me to succeed. That is so goddamn rare in advertising. I've been incredibly fortunate. And so, yes, I brought my own talents to the table, but equally, I was lucky to have the conditions in which I could thrive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit more about your current startup, Make Love Not Porn, and your very bold and courageous and fearless attempt to take on the porn industry, which is something that an industry people barely want to talk about, but I guess it's the reverse of teenage sex. Nobody talks about it, but everybody does it.
But actually, Tomas, I'm sorry, I have to correct you there as well. I'm not taking on the porn industry at all, okay? Make Love Not Porn exists as a counterpoint and a complement to porn. Mm-hmm. If porn is the Hollywood movie, we are the real world documentary. Mm-hmm. So we are something that is enormously badly needed, which is a social platform for that one area of universal human experience that no other social network or platform will allow. Mm-hmm. And so our competition isn't porn, it's Facebook and YouTube, or rather it would be if Facebook and YouTube allowed you to socially, sexually self-express and self-identify, which they obviously don't. So, I am pioneering a whole new category on the internet, which has never previously existed, social sex. And I'm doing that purely to socialize and normalize sex in the real world and talking about sex in the real world. Mm-hmm. Because Make Love Not Porn grew out of my realization through dating younger men that when we don't talk about sex in the real world, porn becomes sex education by default. And so I concepted Make Love Not Porn to socialize and normalize sex. And that's why our tagline is pro-sex, pro-porn, pro-knowing the difference. And also why we call ourselves the social sex revolution. The revolutionary part is not the sex, it's the social.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we know the difference between a Hollywood movie and a documentary, whether it's independent or made by Hollywood. Can you highlight a little bit what the difference is between, let's say, I don't know if I should use the word mainstream porn industry or porn as most people understand it or as it's out there, and Make Love Not Porn?
Sure. So actually, I would start with the design of our platform itself. And I'm going to contextualize that, Tomas, in a more holistic way, because the young white male founders of the giant tech platforms that dominate our lives today are not the primary targets, online and offline, of harassment, abuse, sexual assault, violence, rape, revenge porn. Therefore, they do not and they did not proactively design for it. Those of us who are most at risk every single day, women, people of color, LGBTQ, the disabled, we design safe spaces and safe experiences. So I and my tiny team spent literally years concepting and designing Make Love Not Porn before we ever built it. Because we knew that if we were going to do something totally pioneering, which is invite people to socially share their real world sex as naturally and spontaneously as they socially share everything else on Facebook et al., we had to think through every possible ramification of that to create a completely safe and trustworthy space. As a result, not only do we operate at Make Love Not Porn unlike anybody else in the adult sphere, we operate unlike anybody else on the internet, period. So, for example, It is not possible to complete our submissions process unless your video is fully consensual, legal, everyone's over 18. We require full identifying details and 2 forms of visual ID for every single participant, including, by the way, if you've chosen to have somebody else behind the camera. Even if we never see who they are, we have to know exactly who they are, 2 forms of visual ID. It is not possible to even complete submitting, let alone ever have published anything not fully consensual and legal. Then, when you submit your video, we do something at Make Love Not Porn that nobody else does: human curation. I designed Make Love Not Porn around what every other tech platform on the internet should design themselves around from the get-go. Our curators watch every single video submitted from beginning to end. We do that just to make sure it's real, by the way, but that also enables us to see everything that's going on. So we can guarantee every single piece of content on our platform in a way that nobody else can. Then, when we've accepted your video, we again do something nobody else does. We begin building a personal relationship with every single one of our Make Love Not Porn stars, which is what we call our contributors. So our curators engage with you personally through your chosen communications channel. You know, you can tell us whether you're most comfortable talking by email, Skype, WhatsApp, text, phone, you know, and we will answer any questions, handhold, but we do that because we enormously respect and value everyone who's chosen to share this most intimate part of their lives on Make Love Not Porn. Now, if you're at all worried, by the way, about your employer, your college, fine to be anonymous. You can wear masks, faces in shadow, out of frame. We have a blog post called How to Shoot a Banging Real-World Sex Video Without Ever Showing Your Face, so we help. Your video is only viewable on our platform, only by our members, and only by those members who've actually paid to rent and watch it. And we operate a rent and stream model, not a download and own, because our commitment to our Make Love Not Porn stars is the moment anything changes, your relationship, your life, your circumstances, even just your mind, you tell us, we take your video down, it's gone forever, it's nowhere else on the internet. You know, we might publish your video one day, you can change your mind overnight, we'll take it down the next morning. No one else does that. And we designed all of this because we wanted to create the Facebook of social sex, okay? We wanted people to feel completely comfortable basically sharing videos that are not about performing for the camera, that are simply about doing what you already do on Facebook and other social platforms. Capture what goes on in the real world as it happens spontaneously in all its funny, messy, comical, awkward, ridiculous, wonderful, beautiful humanness. And so that is how we have encouraged and are pioneering social sex.
So it sounds like more like an ethical version of the pornography industry or a porn site than documentary.
No, because again, Tomas, porn is performed, produced entertainment. Okay, it's performative.
I see.
Yep. No,
this
we
is naturalistic,
are
observational. Yeah, I see.
Yeah. I mean, we're not even naturalistic, we're natural. We are, you know how, people just video themselves doing whatever on Facebook.
Yeah.
We are where you video yourselves doing whatever, real world sex-wise.
Yeah.
And it's the same, it's social media, and I'll tell you what's really interesting. Our Make Love Not Porn stars tell us that socially sharing their real world sex is as transformative for them and their relationships as socially sharing everything else has been for the world at large. So, whether they are, we have many solo Make Love Not Porn stars, men and women who film themselves masturbating, usually for the first time ever, by the way. Our Make Love Not Porn stars, the vast majority, had never ever filmed themselves doing anything sexual before ever. They're doing it for us because they believe in our social mission. So they film this incredibly intimate act, shared it on our platform for complete strangers to watch. They tell us that doing that made them love themselves more. It actually enhanced their sexual sense of self, their sexual self-esteem. Couples tell us that doing this transformed their relationship. Because when you decide to film yourselves having sex, you have to talk about it. When you talk about it, it doesn't matter how long you've been together, the conversation goes places it's never ever gone before. Couples write and tell us, we thought we were open. Doing this just took our relationship to a whole new level.
So let's talk a little bit about that, the general tendency to share intimate things on social media in general, right? So you mentioned Facebook, YouTube. what do you think underpins that? What drive underlies or underpins that, right? So obviously, throughout most of humanity, we didn't have social media. We couldn't broadcast our privacy. We started this conversation with your noting that you were actually quite happy to be in confinement or lockdown because you're a private center. But so many people seem to share very intimate and private moments and want to even broadcast them as widely as possible online. And there seems to be no inhibition for a lot of people. We always focus so much on the voyeuristic element of why people want to see it, but what do you think drives people to share so much with the rest, even intimacy?
Do you know, Tomas, I mean, again, I've been saying this for years. Social media is simply a whole new methodology for humanity to do what it's been doing since the dawn of time, especially, by the way, women. It's no coincidence that women are the majority users of social media, because social media is simply a new way to do what we've been doing since dawn of time, which is sharing the shit out of everything in a way that men do a lot less of. Gossipers, we're the chatterers, the talkers, so much so, by the way, that I actually say to brands that think they're targeting men, talk to women, because women will influence men more than men will influence other men. And so, for centuries, there's always been, the town square. There's been the marketplace. There's been the sewing circle. There's been the tavern. We are a sociable race. And so this has just been a way to share things about ourselves, about our lives, that we've always enjoyed doing, but never been able to do in quite the same way, and certainly not with the ability to visually illustrate that sharing as much as we can do today. Now, obviously, like anything else, the degree of sharing, the nature of sharing, the amount of sharing is entirely up to the individual. And so again, through history, there have been inappropriate sharers as much as there have been appropriate sharers. And again, one person's inappropriateness is another person's appropriateness. It's up to, A, each of us to make those judgments, but B, it's also up to society at large to be, to basically be a force for good in managing how people do that. And again, we've always done that. If people have felt that somebody is talking, gossiping too much, they've intervened. Obviously, again, social media gives many more opportunities for intervention. Again, not all good. But I think the important thing to remember in all of this is that the basic human dynamics have been and remain the same. It's just there are now new ways of operating them.
Mm-hmm. So you don't see social media as kind of a more narcissistic environment or setting that kind of fuels or enhances human narcissism. It's just basically amplifying stuff that was there in the first place or before.
Well, again, it all depends on how you use it. But I would say that a number of things that people consider narcissistic, social media has actually been very good for. Taking it back to the topic dear to both our hearts, Tomas, it has been very good for an appalling double standard when it comes to gender perceptions, which is that men can promote themselves all they want, no one bats an eyelid, but women are not allowed to promote themselves in the same way that men do, which is why I encourage women to use social media as a tool for self-promotion. Mm-hmm. And I encourage them not to think about the word self-promotion like it's a bad thing. Because if you don't promote yourself, who the hell else is going to? Men promote themselves on social media all the time, and nobody calls them out on it. And so I encourage women to put their opinions, their ideas out, because they need to inspire other women. And we need the female lens and female perceptions out there as much as men are perfectly happy to burble on about theirs endlessly, without anybody questioning it. That's just one example.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so what about, advice for men that focuses more on emulating or imitating women? You and I wrote a recent Harvard Business Review article, which I really enjoyed collaborating on with, and you've kindly endorsed my last book on the subject. I think we're certainly aligned in terms of seeing a lot of the advice that is usually offered, mainstream advice for women, is just trying to get them to act like incompetent men, right? So, and then say a little bit about how men could improve if they followed a more feminine, or at least a more female-based modus operandi.
Sure. So again, been saying this for years, men need great female role models just as much as women do, because you cannot be what you cannot see applies to men just as much as to women. And unfortunately, there are proportionately very, very few female leadership role models out there. And so again, this is something that I exhort men to do actively and consciously. Again, whether you think you need it or not, consciously look at the way that women lead, look at the way that women operate, and ask yourself, what could I learn from the way that she does it? Because men are never encouraged to learn from women. Women are encouraged to learn from men all the bloody time. And so this has to be a conscious decision on men's part. And, I'm happy to say that I do observe, the younger generation of men doing this much more. I have a large male fan base. I have men who are, wonderfully, naturally complimentary of me on social media in terms of things they've learned from me. And, they haven't stopped to think, oh, I'm not supposed to be grateful to a woman for teaching me anything, And so I encourage all men. And I also think it's very important to understand that when I say that, I am not saying what is all too often the aggravating stereotype default cliche, which is, I'm not saying learn from women because they're more empathetic, they're more human, they're more emotional, more touchy-feely. I have to say, learn from women, men, because women absolutely demonstrate how to deal with really hard shit. Okay, so I was interviewed by Cami Anderson some weeks back for an article that she wrote on Forbes about why women leaders seem to be operating more effectively when it comes to dealing with the pandemic around the world than men are. And, I said to her when she interviewed me, I was thrilled she was asking me for my views on this, because I said, we are seeing a bunch of coverage out there about the fact that, female leaders are operating because they have more empathy. And, fuck that. I said to her, those female leaders, the Jacinda Ardens, the Angela Merkels of the world, look at any female governmental leader, she is up there because she is tough as nails, because, oh my God, the shit she had to go through to get where she is. It's your point, Tomas, the lack of obstacles for incompetent men. Any woman at the top of her country's leadership had to go through so much sexual harassment, sexism, bias, crap to get there. The women who got there have backbones of steel. We do not see the countless other women who went into politics to help their country, who got managed out of it by sexual harassment, by retaliation when they protested, by sexism. Okay, so I can tell you that in my years of observing this throughout my career, I have seen, absolutely getting your point, so many incompetent men as leaders, but so many men who desperately wanted to be liked, okay? And so many women who didn't give a damn about that. I had to say to my leadership teams all the time, it is more important to be respected and not necessarily liked, and liked and not necessarily respected. Because when the chips are down, like they are currently, your people want the leader who they can trust to be tough enough to get them through this, versus the one who's really great to have a drink with down the pub. And again, I've seen so many women who were able to step up to the plate and do the tough stuff. I've seen women be able to fire people when they had to. And I've seen men be completely incapable of it. Okay, and so men, you can really learn from women how to make the tough calls and the tough decisions.
And on that note, I guess the last question I have is, do you think that as a result of the performance of female leaders during this pandemic, we will see an improvement in, defying old archetypes or stereotypes, sexist stereotypes on leadership, or will they just reinforce this idea that, oh, look, she's kind and caring, so that's why she's doing, which in a way is backfiring or just having the opposite effect?
We have to break through those stereotypes, because there's a load of stereotypical bullshit out there, at the moment, the thing that's really highlighting that to us is the fact that, as a number of just published studies and media pieces have pointed out, men are far more likely than women to refuse to wear a mask. Toxic masculinity is literally toxic. Toxic masculinity, the fear of looking like a wuss, the fear it's unmanly to wear a mask, is going to get you killed. And by the way, it's going to get all of us killed. And so there is a load of stereotypical bullshit to work through. And that is why what is really important is the kind of thing that I was so happy to partner with you for our Harvard Business Review piece to do, which is we have to find really innovative and surprising ways to make both women and men rethink all of that, and that's what we just have to keep plugging away at doing.
Cindy Gallop, thank you very much again, and maybe that's the angle for our next piece, and I hope you stay well, and thanks again for making the time. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure, and thank you for, again, all your writing, Tomas, which, as you know, I love, and everything you are doing to change all this.